David, are you gonna have somebody brief this over, this master plan? Gonna have somebody brief it, take it through it, page by page and all that?
I don't want to get too far into it since we haven't.
Right, we're about to call to order. I just
Call to
wanted
order,
to know
yeah.
what to expect. Okay, you guys, you got it nailed down. All right.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to say that there's a matter of business that we need to take care of before we start the meeting. Officially, the chairman, Mr. Russell, and the vice chair, Mr. Price, have been termed off the board. Yes. Thank you. And so I've been in discussions with the city attorney about how we need to proceed. And just as an FYI, there are 2 applications will be considered by the city council next week. So I think we'll take care of this issue next week. However, we're meeting tonight, not next week. So after discussing the item with the city attorney, he's instructed me that what we need to do, there is precedent for this situation. There's actually to the point of the state attorney general issuing some opinion on it. And essentially what we need to do this evening is we can have Chairman Russell continue in his capacity this evening. He can be a voting member, as with Mr. Price. I'm not sure where he is, but he's supposed to be here. So the 2 of them can continue in their capacity. They can vote this evening. They can be part of the discussion. However, I just need to acknowledge that to the board and to the members. And I need to have Mr. Russell kind of as a nod of the head, acknowledge that. And we can continue on. I saw Mr. Russell nod his head for purposes of the minutes. So I think we're okay. So I think at this point we can, Mr. Chairman, you can continue with your meeting and carry it on as if you were, that it's a non-issue, which it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First thing we need to do is call to order. Let us come to order.
Mr. Russell,
Call the roll.
Mr. Russell,
Here.
Mr. Price, Ms. Denny,
Here.
Ms. Gentlecore,
Here.
Dr. Miller, Mr. Stroud,
Here.
and Mr. Thorpe.
Here. Okay, and this is that part of the meeting where we have public participation for any member of the public may come forward to the podium and speak for no more than 3 minutes, and be advised we would not take any action on the subject matter, but we take it under advisement for possible future agenda. So, is there anybody in the public who wishes to come forward and say anything to the Planning and Zoning Board? All right. Seeing none, we will move forward to old business. Is there any old business we have not taken care of? It's I don't think there is. I'm just asking for the record. Go ahead.
Just approval of the minutes from August 4th, is that? Yeah, right.
We have minutes for August 3rd.
Yeah, we don't have them for the August 24th. so
Okay.
that's-
So we're going to bring those forward then and ask for approval. You have, has everybody had those? I don't remember. Yes, they were in the delivered data pack, so you have before you the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? These are for August 3rd. All right, may I hear a motion for approve as submitted?
Mr. Chairman, a motion to approve those minutes.
Thank you. Motion, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay.
Susan Denny.
And Patty, call the roll, please.
Mr. Russell,
For approve.
Ms. Denny,
Four.
Ms. Gentlecore,
For the motion.
Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud,
For the motion.
and Mr. Thorpe.
For the motion.
Okay, very good. Get that out of the way. And I'll sign those off. before I leave. That takes us to new business and we'll approve the minutes. We're now into item 5B on the agenda, which is the public hearing for the comprehensive plan amendments. And it concerns Presidential Streets Master Plan update. And I recognize Mr. Dickey or any member of the staff to see who's going to brief it. Go
It
ahead.
will be me. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kyle Harris. Briefly spoke to you all at the last planning and zoning, but just in case you don't remember, I'm the senior planner here. And I will go on the update Presidential Streets Master Plan. At the last meeting on August 24th, we were joined by Kimley Horn to discuss the Presidential Streets Master Plan. The board gave their thoughts and provided feedback, which was then incorporated into this updated plan. There are a few minor changes, namely that Kimley Horn has just improved the quality of some of the images so that they're a little easier to read. And then some more substantive updates, including language on page 4, providing an overview of the Center Street Basin Study that was performed earlier this year that covers Center Street and I think some of Grant Street and then some of the other areas. So there's some additional language going over that. And then the board had asked that the plan expand on the potential benefits presented by one-way streets as they relate to stormwater management. So additional language as well as tables presenting opportunities and challenges for both one-way streets and two-way streets have been added. And that's on page 62 to 66. Fillmore Avenue is still the example that's used, but the opportunities and challenges really can apply to any of the streets. And so the reaction and the discussion about one-way streets has gotten a lot of positive feedback. So as they say in this plan on page 46, they say changing a street to one-way will change the traffic patterns throughout the neighborhood and should be done in conjunction with a traffic study to determine traffic and mobility impact. So basically that's our next stage in this, assuming you all don't have any more comments. It will be to have Kimley Horn prepare a study specific to the layout and arrangement of the presidential streets and identify potential one-way streets. This study, which we're going to call the phase 2, is going to examine the potential impacts of one-way streets on not only stormwater management, but also on traffic and mobility. So as it relates to obviously cars, but also pedestrians, cyclists, and so on. And it will help us kind of go from this broad view that we have with the plan right now into a more fine-grained view. So looking at specific streets and, providing recommendations based on what they find. So that phase 2 study would be initiated really as soon as we can. So it'll be initiated and completed in fiscal year 22 to 23. It's contingent upon council's approval of the study's recommendations. From there, we would identify specific streets that they mention and go to the public with, so just for an example, if they did identify Fillmore and said this would be a great one-way street, we would then go to the public that is on that street and start to kind of show them the options and the recommendations from the study.
How will you do that? Do you have a meeting here in this chamber or is it
It would
house to house
probably,
visit or what?
it would probably be something maybe at the C5 or City Hall, kind of like a charrette almost. So presenting the different recommendations. We actually go into some detail on the agenda cover. It's a little more specific. So we would work with likely Kimley Horn and present the array of options and hear what they have to say. We need community buy-in to do anything. We want the public to be involved at every step. So that's where we would go once assuming the recommendations of phase 2 are approved. And then from there, in exciting news, we were recently named recipients of a $50,000 grant from the NSF, the National Science Foundation, and it's to do increased public outreach concerning green stormwater infrastructure and low-impact development. And the phase 2 of this grant, which we have not applied for yet, that comes later, but it could be worth up to $1 million. And that is for infrastructure implementation based on the public input and information gathered in phase 1. What's exciting about it and what ties it to the presidential streets is that the timing of the phase 2 grant would line up in a way that the street design process would be starting around the same time that grant might hit. So we can kind of tie those two together and use that grant to fund some of the green stormwater improvements and other things that we would want to go along with the design. If you guys have any specific questions, Lexi Miller, who's our Resilience Engineering Services Manager, got that right? She's sitting next to me, so if you have specific questions related to the grant, you can check with her. If you have questions about the plan, you can ask me.
How do you spell your name? Leslie?
Lexi, my full name is Alexis, but I go by Lexi, Lexi.
Got it. Haven't heard that variation. All right, go ahead.
And that pretty much wraps up what I was going to say. So just wanted to kind of lay the groundwork for that grant, which you may be hearing more about, and then also keep you guys informed as to our next steps with the presidential streets and the updates that you guys had requested last time.
Very good. Are there any questions from anybody on the board that, dig around anything that you've been reminded of or?
No, I do like the added pros and con charts.
Excellent,
That's
yeah.
what we wanted, and
Yeah,
now
they
we've
did a
got
great
the,
job.
yeah. And then I think your 5-step plan as to how to go and implement it. It looks good to me.
Yeah, I like the way it was laid out with all the different steps and plans and the way you can take advantage of opportunities as the funding arises. You've already got the plan in place. So that's pretty good. Good,
Yeah.
good work. Anything else from anybody? Okay, we won't beat it to death. You can raise your hand. We'll go back to anything you want to talk about as we move on. What else?
I think so. David, we asked for. I'm just asking Dave what we would want from you all as far as.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the next step would be for, if the board is ready to make a recommendation to the city council that they, I don't want to say adopt the plan, but what's the word I'm looking for? Endorse the plan. So we want to present this plan to the council now, and with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board as serve as their advisory board for land use policies and master plans and things like that. And so we would at the November council meeting, we would introduce the plan to the council with a recommendation, and we would have them endorse it. And then based on that, then we would start to implement the plan. And as Kyle indicated, phase 2 is going to be, we're going to take a real close look, really drill down a lot more so than is done in the master plan on the one-way and two-way network of the streets. We really need to kind of get into the weeds in that item so we can move forward, because that will inform us as city staff on as we begin to identify streets to really start doing some hard design and engineering work on, if it's going to be one-way or two-way or things like that. That's really what we're looking for, is a recommendation from the board to the council and endorsing.
I have a question, David. As this goes through and we start the different phases, and you start the implementation, will it come back around to us again, kind of look at where we are? And you can say, yeah, let's keep moving on, or is it an ongoing process that will just occur?
Yeah, I mean, my thought right now is this is, the plan was not to come back to the P and Z board on a yearly basis and ask for further recommendations. I think the P and Z board is speaking to the plan as a whole. Now, I mean, what we could do is we can certainly, if it's the board desire, we could certainly have an annual update or an annual report that staff provides to the P and Z board, giving you details on how the implementation is going, whether we're facing any challenges, what the community feedback has been indicating. Yeah, there really would be no, I'll say, official role of the P and Z board once the plan's adopted. Each year, as I indicated, each year, again, depending on funding availability, we would love to have a project. When I say project, I mean a full design construction project on streets in the master plan area every year. There will be a public engagement component every year as for the new streets. Now, the P and Z could potentially could be part of that. As an advisory board of the council, this board could essentially host the public engagement component.
I
But-
think you've answered me. What I didn't want was it to just kind of then take a life of its own, but you're going to be coming back to the folks as you move from one stage to the next. It's not just going to, go through.
Yeah, no, we'll certainly, Kyle would be happy to prepare an annual report.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your presentation.
I'm
Love
sorry.
Yeah, and like I said, community buy-in is important to us at every step of the way. So, and we can certainly keep you guys updated on that and the overall process.
Okay, so you're gonna ask for an endorsement of the plan.
Sure.
So once we endorse it, is this plan, when it goes into, it becomes the plan? You don't just, you change it at will.
So it is more of a guiding document at this point. So there's nothing in here that would, solidify any certain projects. If that sort of answers your question. It's kind of they make suggestions.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, no, we're not going to make any material changes to the plan once it leaves this board and we present it to the council. Were there, again, moving forward, were there challenges or are there certain opportunities or issues that we confront moving as we begin to implement this? If that rose to the level of requiring a change of the plan, we would come back to the planning and zoning board. We would go through this same process and get a recommendation from this board, and we'd take it to the council.
So I was looking at page 730. 73 has got a priority schedule of projects. Short-term, midterm, long-term. So then, all right, my expectation would be that you're gonna pick these off one at a time as funding becomes available. But over here on page 75, we got actual street projects identified. So then what? You're gonna do some of these in parallel, like you got pedestrian bicycle projects, but at the same time, you might decide to do Fillmore Avenue at Ridgewood Avenue in parallel. You're gonna have stuff happening in parallel.
I could take
In
that,
other
Dave.
words, how do I look in here and see what's been checked off? How do I know where we're at?
Mr. Chairman, I can
Yes.
answer that. So the first list you're referring to is more for the council's eyes to be sensitized to what is possible in the broad sense on the short, medium, and long term. The second list you're referring to is more of the actual street designations that should be prioritized as a physical construction project. But the other ones, the other list you're referring to is something that the council can say, oh, in the short term, say we're maybe fiscally constrained or something like that, and we can't do a complete project across the street's length, we could take some of those short-term or maybe even medium-term things and do those first, and then add the longer-term stuff in the long term. So it kind of gives them a little bit more options and flexibility to implement projects that can start to chip away at improving the safety and stormwater issues like that. That's how that should be read.
Okay, so in your periodic update to us, you'll take us back to this
Right,
book and say, hey, we can check that one off, we're working on that. and
Right.
That way we can see a visual of where we're at.
right. Yeah, I imagine a physical street would be brought back to you and say, hey, this street is either under construction or has been completed with these specific improvements. And then there's also a monitoring component, which I think is very cool to talk about, because these streets, not only do we want them to improve safety and such, but even their environmental impacts, and starting to monitor how much nutrient pollution is running off of them into the lagoon. Part of the grant that we are hoping to get through the National Science Foundation would probably fund monitoring equipment that we can put in our stormwater system to see those impacts and the reductions, hopefully. So that can be a part of the annual monitoring too, to say, hey, these streets are actually making a difference, not just in their safety improvements, but in their flood improvements and also in their runoff improvements. So it's a very holistic approach. And I think it'll be really cool to see that change annually.
Yeah, I'd like to see us just slowly work through these.
Right.
And I know it won't happen quickly. These are long-term projects, have to have funding. Do you anticipate using tax money, city tax money, increasing city taxes? Or are you going to try to attack all this with federal funds, grants, gifts?
We do have in the appendix E, I think it's the very last one, they gave us a very extensive list of grants. And
Yes.
part of their scope is that
Yeah.
they will help us apply. So we do have,
And I will remind the board that always keep in mind that the majority of this area in the master plan study area is within the city's community redevelopment agency, the CRA. And so that really brings into play all of our CRA funding that we can apply towards these projects as well. So that's a great opportunity. And I don't know how in-depth each of the board members are with respect to the CRA, but essentially what that means is the property taxes that are paid to the county, even though a property is in the city, still pays county taxes, as you know how you are property payers. But that portion that typically has gone to this county, and they spend it wherever they would like. In the CRA, those county tax dollars come back to the city. We get to apply those as a city see fit. And so, as I said, I think I'm going to say 95% of the master plan area is within the CRA. So we'll have some really great funding opportunities to apply towards implementation at this point. But in addition to the grants that are identified in the plan itself.
I've enjoyed taking the plan. We have the first one and then this revision. I just gather it up and I take it around, show it to the neighbors, here's what the city's planning to do for the city around the presidential streets. So there's quite a bit of interest, and the first question is, how's it paid for? And I just want to give the board some acquaintance about where the money comes from. And so we can assure the public that we're not looking at a city tax increase. We could, but not right now, we're not looking at it. So it comes from funding sources that we've identified. I guess what I'd like to encourage is, when you come to us with update reports, every now and then, give us a commercial about, hey, we've identified a new grant. Hey, we've got some new money coming from this direction. Thought you might be interested. Just so we know. And we can share that with
we're always
the
happy.
neighbors.
Yes, that will be included.
Yeah. Okay, I had some expectation that you guys were gonna turn the pages on this thing tonight and was prepared to do a long bit of business. But it is good. I like the way you put it forward, and I like the way we're gonna treat it. We all have it, we've read it. You don't need to beat it up every step of the way. So, yeah, just give us updates as you discover new opportunities, new funding sources, so that we can just put that in our notes and share it out.
Yes, we will be doing that. That'll be annually or whatever we find most appropriate.
Pick any meeting, you can just give it to us under old business.
Okay.
Don't have anything else. Ladies and gentlemen, do you have anything you'd like to discuss? Okay. Then I'm going to bring us to the close of the quasi judicial plan amendments discussion hearing. And we'll go down to reports and open discussion. And that's are you ready to go to that, or you want to finish up anything, David?
From the board, that the board recommends that the council consider and endorse the master plan. That would be great if the board sees fit to do that. But a recommendation would be wonderful.
Okay, well, let's put a motion on the floor that says Planning and Zoning Board endorses the plan and recommends its implementation by the city council. Can I
Mr.
have
Chairman,
a-
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Patty call roll.
Mr. Russell,
Four.
Ms. Denning,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlecore,
For the motion.
Dr. Miller,
For the motion.
Mr. Stroud,
For the motion.
and Mr. Thorpe.
For the motion.
All right, we've put ourselves behind this plan and we're willing to push it and sell it and help the council get it done.
Thank you all very much. It's an exciting plan.
Okay, we're ready to move to the next one, David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to present this. This should be very quick, at least I hope. At the August council meeting, I don't know if any of you were there, but it was a very energetic meeting. We had many residents that came and spoke in regards to a property owner, a business in town that was, the purpose was that business and that property owner had been cited with some code enforcement issues regarding parking. And specifically the lack of parking that was required by our current city code. Our current city code says in this particular case, it was a restaurant/bar, we'll just call it that. And our code says you need to have one parking space for every 3 seats. Well, that was not being met. And so our code enforcement officers issued a notice of violation. And that was, there was some very strong feelings about that. And we had quite a few people show up that night and speak to the council about the city's parking standards. And I won't go through all the detail. It was a lengthy discussion. But essentially, the council approved 2 motions. First motion was to put in abeyance all code enforcement activity regarding parking issues with commercial operations. That was good. The second motion was to refer this item back to the Planning and Zoning Board for the Planning and Zoning Board to vet this issue. And the issue being parking for bars, parking for restaurants. The council limited the scope of the P&Z's discussion to bars and restaurants, not all commercial. As the board knows, we have parking standards for many, many different commercial. The council said bars and restaurants. P&Z board, discuss it, research it, wrestle with it, come back and make us some recommendations. And my memo goes into kind of the history of how the city of Cape Canaveral has handled commercial parking for bars and restaurants. And it's a very tried and true approach. It's not, I'll say it's not very creative. It's just how things are typically handled. One space for every 3 seats, pretty cut and dry. Everything's fit into that one box. Whether you're a drive-through restaurant, whether you're a sit-down restaurant, whether you're a bar, whether you serve food at your bar, all these different little variations, doesn't matter, you're thrown into one box. I've worked in communities where a restaurant has had literally 10 different subcategories on how parking is treated. And so some places recognize that restaurants or bars have different impacts based on the type of restaurant or bar they are. Our current code does not do that. It's one size fits all. And so I think what our council is asking the board to do is to look into this and to recognize that the city of Cape Canaveral is 2 square miles, approximately. We're a small beach town. We're pedestrian oriented, or at least we're wanting to be pedestrian oriented. And I included in my agenda cover some quotes out of city codes, in particular the A1A, the Overlay District Code, and the call for, the desire for us to be a pedestrian-friendly community, be very walkable and bikeable. And so I mention that because is a walkable, bikeable community, should we treat parking requirements for bars and restaurants the same as a very automobile-oriented city or community? I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question. That's for this board to answer and wrestle with. But the point I want to make, I'm going to wrap it up here quickly. I think I'm starting to be the dead horse here, is that you've been tasked with a job. And I included the minutes in my agenda cover so you can see specifically what the council had requested. What I would like to do, I'd like to get the board to make a recommendation that we ask the council for some funding for a study by a traffic engineering firm that is capable of providing us with options, providing us with what I call best practices on how parking for these particular uses are handled statewide or nationwide. I mean, I don't think we want to become too parochial and okay, this is how they do it in Cocoa Beach. And this is how we've always done it in Cape Canaveral. I think we need to take those scales off and really get creative with this issue and really see how other communities do it.
So just as for grins, how does our parking ordinance for restaurants and bars right now, today, compare with other municipalities? Are we behind the curve, ahead of it, or are we doing about the same things as everybody else?
My sense is that in Brevard County, we're in the pack. I think Brevard County generally, I don't want to sound too critical here, but I think Brevard County generally has relied on the tried and true typical approach. One X spaces for X number of seats or X square footage, one X spaces for X square footage. And it works. But it doesn't recognize specific communities' needs or demographics or geography or aspirations, those kind of very formulaic.
Basically, we got to figure out how to deal with the overflow.
We need to look, my sense from the council meeting and what I heard that night is that the council wants a solution. And they recognize that there's certain situations in the city that cannot provide the amount of parking that our current code would require. It just can't happen. We've got small businesses who are on, obviously, a specific size lot. You've got the building, you've got the stormwater, and you've got so much space left over for parking. And if a business is successful and grows, they're going to be strangled out with the parking. It can't expand. So the options are, well, okay, buy an adjacent lot, which is price prohibitive oftentimes for a small business. They can't go out and buy a $300,000 parcel to put parking in. And so, you know, it's just, that's why I'm saying we're going to have to get creative. But there's also, I'm going to flip the coin here, Alan. There's also unintended consequences to reducing or getting too creative with parking standards, because I've been to some businesses down here on the weekends, and there's parking spilling out onto the streets, onto adjacent properties where they shouldn't be, parking on vacant lots they don't own, and that has its own set of issues. So the success of some of our businesses is creating these issues. And, you know, you can't be allowing or endorsing that kind of activity either. So there's no easy solution. It's going to be something we're going to have to really wrestle with. First, we have to understand the issue. And
Well, the reason we are where we are today is very easy if you know the history. The history of, during the Wild West days, the Apollo days, there was a bar on every corner. Really, there was really a bar on every corner of Cape Canaveral, all the way through Cape Focal Beach, down to where it comes together for Patrick Air Force Base. It was a Wild West show. It was like living in Dodge City. You could sit on the front porch and just watch the cowboys. And so time went by, the space industry changed, people moved away, contracts diminished, employment went down, but us older guys remained, and we had to deal with the aftermath. And I sat on the planning and zoning boards during those years, and our guiding principle was to do something with all the bars. And you could drive around Sunday morning at 6 o'clock Sunday morning and see all the drunks fall out of the bars and fall on the street. And the cops had to go around, pick them up. They literally had to go and get vans to stuff them into and take them somewhere. So the guiding principle was to, if you're going to serve alcohol, you got to serve food. You can't just be a bar. So that cured that problem. And yeah, it created another kind of problem, but it's always the way it goes. So, and then what, if you're going to have served food, you have to have a certain amount of parking. So ergo, the existing formula.
Right.
And that's where it all came from, just trying to clean up the rowdy behavior. Well, I think it's gone now. And it's time to do something different, and I'm okay with that. So we can either do it the old way and say, council, let's just keep it like we've got it, and let the owners go and buy extra property if they need parking, or pay rent for parking on extra property. Or we can do it like the city of Rome. You can find a parking place, park in it. No matter where it is. So it's somewhere in between. And I think the advice is right. We need to get somebody with some know-how and some engineering and traffic knowledge to come back with some solutions.
I've actually, the city I used to work in before I came to Cape Canaveral, we actually had an area of the downtown. It was a little bit more urban than Cape Canaveral. But we actually did away with all of our parking. Of course, the city came in and put a parking garage in. So that you know, you can't just have one without the
There's
other.
a solution, you know.
There's a solution.
Free parking
That's right.
garages.
And these areas, most of the areas that we're having our problems in, again, are in our CRA, which we have funding to do creative things with respect to parking, potentially. So, but there's all kinds of things as far as just do away with parking requirements. That has its own set of consequences. But my point is there, we have a number of things we can talk about. And yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you saying that. I don't know if we need to go as far as I'm sorry.
No, I was just-
Oh, okay. I don't know if, ideally, I guess I would like to get a motion or at least nodding of heads from the board about asking the council to authorize some funding for us to go get a consultant to help us with some basic information. So we can have at least be educated when we're having our conversations and talking about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Before I kind of formulate a little framework for a motion for you, I do that to be helpful, not because I want it done my way. Bob Barker, the owner of Radisson Hotel and some other hotels around town, he got in an argument with the city of Cocoa Beach about parking. And the city of Cocoa Beach wanted to put parking meters all around his business. At the time, the manager, Ron John. In fact, he built Ron John as the way it is now, while the owner had to flee the country for some legal reasons. And he built that successful business. So then the owner came back, Barker relinquished the ownership, took over a hotel and business next door, got in an argument about parking. He built a free parking garage. There is no parking problem around those businesses now. So sometimes private initiatives solve the problem. So we got to be open to that too. I've always enjoyed looking at that. It's just been one of those fun things to watch. Barker and the parking in the city of Cocoa Beach. It's been a fun circus. But anyway, there are solutions there for us. We can check them out and entertain them. I think the idea is a good idea that we ask for funding to hire a consultant with knowledge about restaurants and bars, parking. But David, should we frame the work statement in, only bars and parking or should we, I don't know, tell us something here.
Well, I think the council's motion asked the P and Z board specifically to focus on bars and restaurants. So personally, do I think we should take a wholesale look at everything? Yes, but that was not what the council asked. So I think we need to focus and limit our research and our recommendation to those two things.
But I think this ties into our multi-use land too, right? Because you want that to be walkable and so forth, and that's going to be, are we going to include that in there? Because we have a charter to come up with the multi-land use, and parking is going to be a big issue for that.
Yeah, I was really impressed. The night that we had all those folks here speaking to the council about that business, a lot of them stated right here, right where I'm standing, a lot of them either walked or rode their bikes to that particular establishment. And, and that's the kind of community we are. We ask, we're encouraging that. So, yes. But again, on the flip side, there's always two sides.
Yeah, I know. At that meeting, the mayor just wanted to take the paragraph out. Why do you even have the parking requirements? And I guess I have that question too.
Yeah.
When our mission statement is to be walkable and bikeable and all of that.
No, I like I said, I've worked in places where we've done away with parking requirements. But Cape Canaveral is an interesting situation because we're very linear, what I call a linear city. We're built along North Atlantic and Aspen. We don't have a downtown per se. We're not really a compact as far as our retail commercial area goes. It's a strip commercial. That's how we are, what we are. That doesn't generally lend itself really well to doing away with parking requirements. But there are perhaps areas of the city where we could look at doing away with or reducing parking areas that lend themselves to being more accessible to biking and walking. So I'm not, and so we don't have to go into this thinking, we're going to have one recommendation for the entire city. We can go into this thinking about, maybe one size doesn't fit all. Maybe we can have different recommendations for different places. My point is that we should really not have any limitations. We really need to have a very open mind and create some flexibility. And I think we can, it always helps when we have a look at how other people do it. There's a lot of creative folks out there who are ahead of us in this thing.
Well, I got an idea for you, comrade. It goes something like this. We could put a motion on the floor that says, Planning and Zoning Board requests funding approval to hire a consultant firm to evaluate the city's restaurant and bar parking and to recommend various solutions for different areas of the city. You want to improve that? Add words, say something different?
What will we do about special events, rocket launches, the port, when we have multiple numbers of ships in the port? I mean, it's a lot of traffic where I am. And really have to be creative if we're going to solve a problem like that, because it's growing and there's more people, more tourists, and just having it black and white, I don't know how that would really work. I don't know how you could manage it, because when there's a rocket launch, there's people everywhere. Our office, outside our office, when people are going to the port, Ubers and people parking in the middle of the driveway. So I don't know how there has to be some flexibility. And on those occurrences, either we have to be a little bit more flexible with the parking, or, I don't know how you would manage it.
There are times when we will be simply overwhelmed with parking requirements. And there are times that those may be the times where the city has to back off, be benevolent, ask our city police to, instead of enforcing regulations, to help the traffic move and help the traffic part. Something like that. Good stuff, Eugene, good stuff. We've got to talk about all that.
And I have another question. Because the port and the space industry here, and it brings in a lot of people, would they possibly help the city with possibly building free parking lots for when tourists do come to watch, the space launches or even the port? I know they have parking lots down there, but they extend all the way up to where I'm at on Astronaut Boulevard. So would it be, I don't know, would it be out of order to ask them to assist the city with this problem?
Well, it occurs to me, and we're just kind of inventing on the fly. Hold that thought, David. You look like you got something. We could invite in a consultant, ask them to come here and talk to us and listen to us, and listen to the concerns such as you're bringing forward. Would you do this? Would you fold the port parking overflows into your study? Here's what happens to us on launch day. Would you please think about that? And we're a unique town. We, Titusville, Cocoa Beach, Cocoa, we're all towns that suffer from overflow on launch day. Please give us some counseling, ideas, do some research, come forward with something to do, something to work. I like that. So I think one of the things we want to do is talk to our consultant before they go off and shut the door and start working with the council. We want to throw our concerns out there. David?
Agree with everything that Mr. Chairman said. I think that's important to kind of give, set the parameters. But I will say this, several years ago, maybe 5 years ago, the city council specifically indicated they do not, these are my words, they do not want to do the port parking lot for a number of reasons. And we don't need to get into all of that right now, but port parking, cruise parking, even operations that support the port, such as bus companies and taxi companies, they've all been very, I'm not going to say written out of the code, they're not allowed in the city, but there's very, very tight controls on where that can happen in the city. So there was a conscious effort by the council to limit those type of uses in the city.
Well, the council did some working meetings with the port, didn't they not, to try to,
Not since I've been here, so that could have happened before I got here. It was 8 years ago.
you weren't here during the Great Taxi Cab War? Well, that's another story, folks.
Yeah,
Okay,
but these are all things that, as Mr. Chairman said, we can have this conversation. It's, this board you can have whoever you want come speak to you, whatever you feel is necessary and important to educate yourselves and make good decisions. Totally within your purview.
Yeah. We have a wide leeway. We are clothed in great power. We can go and seek answers and consultation anywhere we need to do the council's homework. That's our job, to work a controversy and seek all the information and work it until we roll it into some acceptable solutions. We can do that all kinds of reasonable ways.
So I was at the council meeting. I do think we need to keep the scope at the bars and restaurants for this action item. There, several other establishment names were tossed out that they're not per code or this ordinance, I'm sorry, the ordinance either. And that's why they said, okay, we're gonna, not enforce this code until we come up with a better one.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you guys are listening. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, can you describe the nature of the violation at that particular establishment? Were they using too much, too little? What's the nature of?
The nature of the violation is that the particular establishment didn't have the proper and the necessary parking, off-street parking. It's one space per 3 seats. This particular operation had, let's just say, 150 seats. That most of those seats, the issue resulted because most of those seats were put in after the business opened up. They grew and expanded, and they put seats in. It really wasn't done with city approval and involvement. And so,
I guess I want to question that because what I heard is they had the whole plan for the restaurant. All of the permits were approved.
that's
You
true.
have the fire department, says they have enough seats, you're to the code.
That's for occupancy.
And
purposes.
then, if this enforcement was coming and if you needed to enforce that, then they would lose their business
Well,
after the fact. But then there were other businesses that had the same issue.
yeah, I don't want to get into.
No, I just wanted to let these people know what I heard.
Yeah, well, what you hear and what is facts can oftentimes be two different things. If you'd like to individually come in, I can show you the facts.
Sure.
I can show you what was approved when they came in for their BPR, for business tax. and that's out there now. And we're not, I'm just gonna stick up for our staff. We don't willy-nilly make things up and go out and code enforce people, especially small
Yeah.
business.
No,
So
I agree. I would love to sit down with you to understand.
that'd be great.
I love that.
So, yeah, they're good. We rely on them greatly,
Yeah.
especially when we're enforcing our city codes. We have a special magistrate. He's a judge, and he looks at facts. He doesn't look at hearsay, what's been said on the street.
Mhm.
So I would encourage you rather, anybody, any of the board, anybody, I would encourage you rather than spread what you hear, let's talk about facts.
Mhm. Perfect.
So anyways, I'd like to kind of refocus back to,
Steve, so we go through this exercise of bringing a consultant in, and we spend some funds and stuff on it, and come back to the report and everything. At the end of the day, at this particular establishment, that report's not gonna grow any land, though. It's not gonna grow any parking spot for it.
Correct.
So I see us going through an exercise here that it's hard for me to imagine that that business is gonna benefit from it, because it's not gonna grow land, plain and simple.
My thought exactly, but our job is to just take a look at all of it. And that may be one of the concrete conclusions that boils out of council. We're
Is
not
it,
growing any more land.
is it a variance that they're looking to go for, or are we actually looking for rewrite a code specifically?
there really isn't a variance to our parking requirements. That's not even eligible to request a variance for. So we're gonna have to look at our codes.
Mhm.
Because I don't know if it's common knowledge, but our staff is very interested in seeing small business flourish and grow. And if a particular city code is restricting that and throttling the growth of business, that's a problem, and we need to look at it, and we need to get creative. And we may,
One of the things we may come up with is, I'm sure we'll entertain it, is everybody has to share their parking.
Mhm.
So, there's one avenue there.
So, and I use the word variance because I found the variance in the text here that was from the council meeting, and also I found the word variance in the description in this little book I've been reading.
yeah, if you look at the definition of a variance in our zoning code, it's very specific on what you can ask a variance for.
It's relieve of hardship.
Right,
Relieve a hardship.
right.
Exactly
But,
right.
but the code says it has to be a dimensional standard that you can ask for a variance for. It doesn't say specifically about parking.
What is
So
the hardship?
if we need to change the definition of a variance or go in there and tweak the code to allow variances for certain things, that's where Anthony gets involved. But my point, as I made earlier, nothing's off the table. We can discuss this and we can do our best to provide relief for our restaurants and our bars in this discussion.
Well, this is our first hot potato that we've had since we've been together as a board. And it'll be interesting to debate information and facts and see what boils out of it. I like these kinds of exercises because you learn things you didn't know before.
So
Go ahead.
I think, having somebody come in and do the study, but I think they should look at all of the small businesses and their parking and their requirements and see how many other small businesses are affected by this to take that into consideration.
Well, we can put that bug in the consultant's ear, but still in all, once we do this for restaurants and bars, nothing says we can't apply those solutions elsewhere. So we'll just learn things that look pretty good here, and maybe they'll look better over there.
One step at a time.
We'll think about that. Well, okay, let's go ahead and get out of here so we can have an evening. So again, I recommend to you some motion along the lines of Planning Zoning Board requests funding approval. I mean, once we get the approval, we can expend funds. They can put whatever barriers they want to on the funding amount to approve funding to hire a consultant firm to investigate the city's restaurant and bar parking and to recommend various solutions for different areas of the city. That way you don't get one size fits all, you get some options. That's my suggestion to you guys. Improve that. Let's get a motion on the floor.
A motion to move forward with that.
Okay, you're okay with that wording? I'll read it again so everybody's got it. Request funding request funding approval to hire a consultant firm to investigate the city's restaurant and bar parking and to recommend various solutions for various areas of the city. Does that work for everybody? You're looking like you might have a,
No,
Change.
that'll work. It's just wrong.
we just want money to work for it.
I'm
We want
hoping
to check.
That means just not gonna get the money and take the contract. I'm sure you'll check them out well. But hopefully we can talk to him and direct him. And I don't know
Well,
how you put that in.
Before we put that motion on the floor and vote on it, let's talk about how we select this consultant. Who gets to choose? Who gets to pick?
I will. The new consultant, I'm assuming you have to put out some sort of RFP and then council have to retain someone in budget.
Yeah, I mean, we do have a CCNA list that has some consultants that have that expertise. So we could go to our CCNA list and, I mean, the logical, at least in my mind, the logical choice is Kimley Horn. They've done the Presidential Streets Master Plan. They're doing a golf cart analysis, doing a bunch of traffic counts and intersection analysis in all the presidential streets area. So they've got a pretty good grasp of parking and traffic in the city. That seems to be a pretty straightforward.
If they're under continuing services agreement,
Yeah.
to discuss the path.
Yeah.
The proposals from them and
Right.
evaluate it from there.
Right. And for all the board members, I'm not sure if everybody knows what CCNA is. It's basically, it's a very simple person. I'm going to speak it simply. Basically, a group, the city issues a request for qualifications and get responses. We have a committee that goes through those, and we select consultants based on that.
Okay,
tab that we
so,
send.
let's cut to the chase here. We don't need to beat this to death. The city has lists of continuing services. Tonight, we've learned that those lists exist. They know what they're doing.
Yep.
They can pick off those lists, people who are knowledgeable about doing those things. Pick us one. All we're asking for is approve the funding to hire one. You pick us one. If we don't like what we're hearing, we'll change it. Okay, so we've got that motion. Request funding approval to hire a consultant firm to investigate the city's parking, restaurant, and bar, to investigate the city's restaurant and bar parking.
Do we
And
put special
recommend-
events? Yeah,
Say again?
special events or, I don't know how we can word it, but it's bar, restaurant, parking, and special events. Whenever there's some type of special event in the area that's gonna affect the area as far as parking, like a rocket run.
Yeah.
Do you think that if we do that, I see where he's coming from, that would that cause the council not to vote for it?
Would it what? I'm sorry.
If we added something to what the council wanted us, would that cause them not to vote for the money?
As you open up the focus of the study, it's going to cost more money, basically. That's the bottom line. And so the council specifically said, we want this, we want X. And so when you start saying, we're going to give you X plus Y, I don't know how the council will react.
Well,
But-
here's another way to think about it. we can go ahead and pursue the parking for bars and restaurants. But somewhere in all that, we're gonna see stuff that looks good to apply to other occasions and other areas. So we will learn from all that. And as we learn it, we can come back for another bite at the apple and start applying it to a special event. How's that sound? Just pick us one to do the study and give us some solutions to chew on, and we'll chew them real good, and we'll decide whether it applies elsewhere, and we can tell the council that.
To cover Board Member Thorpe's concern regarding special events, oftentimes implicitly when traffic analyses are conducted, peak days are considered. And so when you're looking at that data, the consultant will oftentimes consider those heavy days. They'll consider things like weekends and then special events, and then also kind of a more typical day. So that data and that'll kind of be captured implicitly in the analysis most of the time. So
Okay,
keeping it to the scope of what the council recommended still implicitly captures that concern.
Okay, great, because one sort of affects the other.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that consultants, they'll consider all factors.
And the board's gonna have an opportunity to talk with a consultant too.
Right.
And so it's, they're not gonna be working in a vacuum. So if there's a particular interest or concern that one of the board members has, there'll be an opportunity to discuss.
When our consultant is set free to go and do work, do we get to ask them to come back and tell us what they've learned up to this point, so we can think about it?
Yeah, that'll all be part of the scope that the consultant drafts and provides us. And I believe what we could do is we could have one or more presentations and meetings with this board as part of their scope. So, yeah. Now, obviously, the more times the consultant travels to Cape Canaveral and speaks with us, guess what? More money.
Yeah, we'll have to be careful with that.
Yeah.
And we won't abuse it. This should be very interesting. All right, we've got a motion.
I'll second the motion.
We need a movement to propose the motion first. Would somebody move that we approve it? You did it? Okay, Stephen did. Stephen moved that we accept the motion. I have a second. We're ready to go. I think we've discussed it enough. Patty, did you call a roll?
Mr. Russell,
4.
Ms. Jenny,
For the motion.
Ms. Gentlecore,
For the motion?
Dr. Miller, Mr. Stroud,
For the motion?
and Mr. Thorpe.
For the motion.
Okay, thank you. We'll begin to accumulate knowledge about parking. Anything else, David?
And this is really going to affect the chairman more than anybody. One of the things that the city manager and I have been talking about recently is when presentations, this board's recommendations are presented to the city council, we do so currently via a memo. We'll say P&Z board on so-and-so date recommended so-and-so and da-da-da-da. And that's put into the agenda packet. City manager and I have been talking about perhaps it would be more impactful if a member of the board, specifically the chairman of the board, so Lamar, you, would come to the council meetings to speak directly to the council on the P&Z's recommendation. And our memo is limited. It's very factual. It just says recommendation is X. We don't add any editorial comments into it. We don't do anything other than that. So I'm not saying everyone, but there may be situations where it would be advisable and proper for the chairman or somebody from the P and Z board to come and speak to the council regarding a
Okay.
particular matter.
I'm willing to do that, and
Okay.
I'm sure that Dr. Miller and Steve and the rest of us members have had management charm school training, so we can handle it. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, we have one more thing too. This is a giant FYI to the entire board. There was an outline placed in front of you at the start of the meeting, the blue, with the blue header. This is a outline that was given to council on Monday, and this is the announcements that the Community and Economic Development Department now has a new division within it called the Resilience Division, which is headed by myself and is staffed by Lexi Miller as well. And then Kyle dabbles in it too from time to time. But this division has the task of kind of streamlining sustainability and resilience-related endeavors and being an interdepartmental resource to push these types of things forward. And in that light, this board seems to always do a lot of things related to that stuff. There are many cities that have dedicated sustainability citizen advisory boards. And I think what we're trying to say right now is that this board might take on in the near future some more things related to those subjects. Kind of did so tonight with something like this. And in that light, we're probably going to be bringing along some guest speakers to come and present to you guys to get you more informed and aware about what we're doing internally and externally and the context for why we're doing these things. I think one of the first guest speakers we were going to have lined up was someone actually from the East Central Florida Regional Planning Council, who's an established partner with us for many years. And we'll also be sending from time to time, not all the time, some webinars that you guys can attend virtually to kind of gain knowledge if you want about this type of stuff. Things that the Resilience Division does, just for some context, things like the Resiliency Action Plan, renewable energy installations, infrastructure hardening against storms, things like that. So that'll be coming down the line. We're really excited for that, and we just wanted to give you an update. So thank you.
Very good, Zach. Appreciate that. I think the board's willing to take that on as it comes, and we'll do it as we can, and if we can't, we'll find another way to do it. Thank you. Anything else from the staff? Anything from the audience? Okay, anything from the other members? Good ideas. Thank you. I appreciate those comments and input. It's going to be a fun study. Okay. Can I have all in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.